episode, we talk about the crucial role of women in property, top tips for young women who want to progress through the property industry, and whether the proposed Renters' Rights Bill is driving landlords out of the sector, with our special guest, ARA Propertymark President, Angharad. Thank you so much for joining me today, Angharad. It's really great to talk to you, and obviously we'll talk about women in property and also what's going on in the private rented sector at the moment, particularly with the Renters' Rights Bill. But firstly, if we can start with ARLA Propertymark, which is the UK's top professional body for letting agents, and it champions standards and regulations in the residential lettings and property management industry. Firstly, I have to congratulate you as ARLA Propertymark President. Congratulations, that's such an amazing achievement.
Oh, thank you, Gabby.
Oh, you're very welcome. So it would be really nice to hear from yourself. How did your property journey start? And I mean, how has it led you to become ARLA Propertymark President?
Well, like most people, I fell into a role in property, and I basically stuck around because I liked it and I was good at it. So I started in property back in 2010 in a tiny independent letting agent and service apartment company in Cardiff Bay. And from there, I went to work in the world of corporate property management, managing tens of thousands of properties from one room. And from there, that's where I did my ARLA Propertymark qualifications. That's where I became qualified as a letting agent, which is a really important step, I think, in any letting agent journey, because there's just so much there's so much legislation that you need to know about, that you need to be confident about when you're dealing with landlords and tenants. So from there, then I relocated and I became operations manager of a large independent, and then I became managing director. And now I help run a large estate agency group in the UK. I run the lettings division across 40 branches in the UK. So throughout that, the ARLA Propertymark membership has been by my side since I got qualified back in 2013. I became a member in 2015, and then I became part of the regional exec panel back in 2018, which sort of that's been with me throughout my career, that membership and then that support from the organisation.
Well done.
So a big journey.
I know, a really big journey. And as you were saying, sort of starting off small in Cardiff Bay and then up to now. That's so amazing. So well done and congratulations. And I mean, as ARLA Propertymark President, what are some of your top priorities? As we know, the industry, there's a lot in the industry to talk about, and obviously we'll touch on some of those. But can you just name me sort of what are the top 3 priorities as ARLA Propertymark President?
So yeah, for me, my top 3 would be, we are going into what will be a challenging year for letting agents this year. We've got a change of government, we've got the Renters' Rights Bill on the horizon. And for me, one of my main priorities is going to be supporting members and all letting agents through this change that we are inevitably going to see for our industry. We're going to see we're going to see things that impact landlords, impact tenants, impact the amount of stock that we've got available, and throughout it all, we need somebody there to be able to hold a helping hand, who understands us, who is a working practitioner. So that's my main priority, is supporting members through that change. I'm also really passionate about young people in our industry. I think what I said at the start about falling into a career in agency is what I think happens a lot. And I'd really like to be able to try and change that, so that young people actually aspire to be in the property industry from a young age. You know, they go home from school and they tell their parents, I want to be an estate agent when I grow up, or I want to be a letting agent when I grow up. That just doesn't happen at the moment. And I'd love to change that one day. So to do that, I already am quite visible in local schools. I talk to a lot of young people about careers in property. So I'm going to do more of that throughout my year as president. And then the third thing that's really important to me throughout my year is about female representation in our industry, especially at senior levels. So for me, being a positive role model, being not only ARLA Propertymark President, but a director of a large estate agency group, is really important that I show women that they can do it, that they can achieve higher things if they want to. I'm also a mother, so you can do it whilst you have children. So yeah, for me, it's the positive role model aspect about my role is really important to me too.
That's really great to hear all about your priorities there. And obviously, you were touching on there about women in property is one of your main priorities as ARLA Propertymark President. And I want to touch on that with you because when we were organising this interview, what I found really interesting, what you said, is that it's not the problem for women getting into the industry. It's actually them progressing through the industry, as you say, into these senior leadership roles, like yourself as ARLA Property Mark President. And I found that really interesting because the property sector can be seen as quite male dominated. I mean, particularly sort of at senior levels, you think of it's mainly going to be a man at a senior leadership role. So, what do you say to women, and in particular young women as well, who want to progress in their career in property?
I'd say first of all that it is achievable. So don't write yourself off at an early stage that you can't do it. I think there are women out there who are showing that it is achievable, that you can have a senior position and have a family, that they're not mutually exclusive. You don't have to have one or the other. So first of all, it is achievable. The second thing is to be yourself. I think so many women, they think that they have to try and be more male, in order, and try and give off more what we would call traditional male traits. But actually, being a woman in a room full of male, men, senior men, being a woman is your superpower. You should be proud of the fact that you are a woman, that you have a different perspective to others in that room. So don't try to fit in. It's really important to be yourself because there's only one you. And the other thing I would say is that often as women, we get accused of being emotional in business. It's often used as a weapon against us, but actually, to try and combat that is to always make sure that when you're presenting arguments, that you're presenting them based on facts, on figures, on things that you can demonstrate very clearly, rather than trying to present things using your emotions. I think if you can win with figures, then it's very difficult to argue against that and try and accuse you of being emotional. So yeah, for me, it is to believe that you can do it. It is to be yourself and understand that being yourself is your superpower. And number three, it is to always present any arguments with facts and figures and what you can present very clearly, rather than using sayings like "I think" or "I feel." I think it's always better to back it up with the facts.
That's some really, really good advice there. So I hope any women that are watching, or any young women as well, they feel inspired by that and take on that advice. And as you were saying as well, as a young woman yourself, I mean, you're a mother now, I mean, which is amazing. Congratulations. So do you find it, I suppose, when you've been in the industry, have you found it challenging as a woman in the property industry when you've been sort of progressing through to these leadership roles, or?
Yeah, I'd say, I mean, I have had situations in the past where I have been made to feel bad because of my gender. I don't get it anymore. And I think it's for a number of factors where I don't feel it so much anymore. But definitely early on in my career, I was, I could feel the misogyny in some roles that I was in, and I was often accused of perhaps treating women more favorably than men, which isn't something that I would do. I think I treat every gender the same, but I think it's often used as something negative against women because we try and support women, we try and build them up. So I have definitely felt it in the past. I think any advice to give for women of the future is to feel confident to speak up. And if you do experience situations where you feel like you're being treated differently or negatively because you're a woman, is to have the confidence to stand up for yourself and say, this isn't right. It doesn't matter what gender I am, I still bring something really valid to the table and really valuable. And that's what should be important, not what gender I am.
Exactly. That's some really good advice there. And I'm really sorry to hear about the past as well. Like as you were saying there, because you were seen as a woman and then there was all sort of the emotional baggage, that they sort of like sometimes people say, isn't it? But do you think that it's actually changing now? Do you think that, are you seeing for yourself that more women are entering the property industry?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I see more women entering. I think, like I said, when we were discussing before we came on, that I still think that there is an equal number of men and women entering the industry. But what I see more of now is that senior women are supporting women to consider themselves for more senior roles. So I definitely see more women in senior roles within agency because they know it's possible now. They've had people go before them. They understand what they need to do to get to these, the next rung of the ladder. So I definitely see more women at those more senior positions, but I also see more women supporting women. So there's some fantastic female groups out there, not just internally. So within Andrews, where I work, we have a women in property group, which we meet once a quarter, and we talk about things that are important to women in the business and how we can help. But there's also lots of external groups as well. So we've got women in residential property, we've got women in estate agency, and they exist as spaces to support women, to discuss when they're in a safe space, when there are issues, and to run events and promote networking and and help people grow their circle as women in the industry. Because sometimes it can feel like you walk into a room and you're confronted with sort of a wall of men. So it's important that we are doing what we can to network as well with women in our industry and senior women in our industry. So yeah, I definitely I can feel a change, and it's because of these groups. It's because of fantastic women who've gone before us, and we're all supporting each other to get to the next level.
That's really great to hear. As I think you were saying as well, it can be sometimes quite isolating, if you are a woman in the property industry. But I think with these women property groups, I think it's really, really great that there is, as you were saying, there's a team, isn't there, right
Yeah,
there to help you and stuff. So I think that's really, really great. So
it's all
if we
about this.
can,
Oh, sorry, I
sorry, no,
was going
you
to
go
say.
ahead. You go ahead.
It's all about the support, but it's also about the role modeling, isn't it? And if you look
Yeah.
at of ARLA Propertymark, of which I'm the president, both the president elect behind me and the vice president behind that, we're all women now. So is an all woman lineup of the presidential team of ARLA, which we haven't seen for many years. And the fact that there are 3 women in those roles, it's really good for role modeling to future women that they could do that. They can see that and go, I could do that one day. I'm going to go for it.
Really great to hear all about these women property groups and how they can help, and particularly with what you were saying there about with the role models as well, particularly for any young women watching. They're going to be really, really inspired to hear by that, how all you women are all in leadership roles. So that's really, really great to hear. We could talk more about women in property, but I do want to move on, if we can, to the Renters' Rights Bill. Obviously, as you were saying earlier before, there's a Labour government, so everything is all changed. So with the Renters' Rights Bill, it seems to be worrying a lot of landlords and also letting agents as well, particularly with the abolition of Section 21. Do you think that more landlords are going to leave the sector because of the Renters' Rights Bill?
I think no. I think over the last 4 to 5 years, we have seen a change in landlord behaviour. And we've seen landlords who perhaps bought when property values were a bit cheaper, perhaps in the 90s, early 2000s, who might have had 1 or 2 properties as a bit of a hobby as a landlord. Those are the landlords that we have seen exiting over the last 4 to 5 years. And that's because they have come to the end of their property journey. They bought it as a hobby. It was supposed to be somewhere to have a bit of an income, and they were always going to retire off it and live off that income in their retirement. So I think we've definitely seen those type of landlords leaving the industry. But what I also think we have seen in contrast is landlords who are perhaps who are larger landlords, who are incorporated, who see this as their main job, one of their main sources of incomes, they are buying more properties. Because if you're in it for the long run, if you are a landlord who sees that you're going to buy this property and you're going to own it for the next 30 years, you're not really as concerned by these winds of change that are happening now, because you know that ultimately you're still going to have this property for the next few years. So, you're just going to ride it out and roll with whatever happens. So we have seen some landlords leave, but we have also seen more other landlords join and to get larger, which is good, which is what we want. I think I was reviewing our figures for Andrews today actually, and over the last 6 months, so half year 24 versus half year 1 23, so the same 6 month period, exactly the same number of landlords terminated tenancies in the 2.5 years. So we haven't seen a huge change in the amount of landlords giving Section 21s this year versus last year, which is quite comforting, because sometimes if you listen to what's going out there in the media, there's this sort of mass hysteria about all these landlords leaving, where are these tenants going to live? But actually our figures are showing that that's not correct. And I think it's because we have more landlords joining who are larger landlords who are in it for the long run. I'm a landlord myself, and my plans over the next 20 years are just to continue to buy and build a portfolio for me to live off in my retirement. So any changes that come in with Labour over the next year or so, yes, I will have to educate myself. Yes, I'll probably have to amend some of the things I'm doing, and change some of the things I'm doing, and perhaps change my business plan. But ultimately, it's not going to affect whether I own that property in the long term or not.
That's really interesting to hear, as you were saying there about the figures that you've been looking at, because I suppose you do hear, I mean, there's quite a lot of smaller landlords that are sort of quite worried about, I suppose, what the Renters' Rights Bill is going to introduce. And also there's some talk about, I think, EPCC ratings by 2030, I think Ed Miliband. So I think there are some combination of factors which are worrying landlords, but that is comforting to hear that this year that you've actually seen less Section 21 notices. So that's really good to hear. And I suppose, well, a lot of landlords are worried about the Labour government. So what would you, and as a landlord yourself, what would you like to see from the Labour government that will help support landlords and letting agents as well?
I think there's three things that I'd really like to see from the new Labour government. Number one is that I'd really like them to communicate and liaise with a cross-section of the property industry. And it feels often that the government listen to certain groups, so they listen to the tenant groups, and it often feels like there's not as much attention paid to the landlord or agent groups. So I think it's really important that they get a balanced view of what the industry needs and what the potential impact of any changes could be. I think that it's too often that the tenant groups are listened to and the landlord and agent groups are not. So number one is that they listen to a cross-section of our industry. Number two is that if and when they ban Section 21 notices, that they commit to reforming the courts before that happens. Because if they don't reform the courts before Section 21 is banned, then we're going to be in a real situation, because the courts already have massive backlogs. It already takes several months in order to get a court date. That's only going to go up massively if they're not reformed by the time Section 21 is banned. So that's my second thing: reform those courts before we ban Section 21. And then the third thing is I'd love there to be some sort of incentive provided to landlords who keep their tenants in their properties long term, because ultimately what a landlord wants is a good long-term tenant. They don't want that investment to be empty. And ultimately what a tenant wants is a long-term safe tenancy. So if there could be some mechanism, maybe some sort of tax break or some sort of incentive to offer landlords to keep their rental properties and keep their tenants in there long term, then I think that would be really beneficial for our sector, and it would actually go towards helping landlords who have provided this vital housing for their tenants for many years. Those are my three.
Exactly as you were saying there, and particularly with what you were mentioning in your first point about you have these big tenant groups that tend to be more listened to by the government, and then we do need some more landlord groups which the government will actually listen to and actually hear from landlords themselves rather than just tenants. And of course, we have the Propertymark Housing Coalition, which Property Nominate is a part of, and we're hoping that we can make the PRS more fairer, not just for tenants, but also for landlords too. So how do you think that this coalition will help landlords, and in particular, hopefully, that the government will actually listen to this housing coalition?
Well, I think it's strength in numbers, isn't it? I think
Yeah.
even though Propertymark is the largest industry body for letting agents and estate agents in the UK, we are just one voice. So the more extra voices we can get to join that, the better. It's really great to see that there's various companies that have joined it, and some local landlord association groups, because the more that we can get involved together, all speaking together in one voice, and the stronger that voice becomes. And it's easier then for the government to to listen to us, to rely on some of the things we're saying, because it's backed up by so much data of landlord members, agent members across the country. So I think it's a great thing. I think the more that we can get involved in it, the better. And then we can really use that voice for some good to make sure that any changes the government bring in are fit for purpose and don't end up really damaging the PRS even further than it already has been.
Exactly, and you were obviously mentioning there about the private rented sector. And now my final question, I feel like it's such a really, really big question to ask, but what do you think of the future of the private rented sector?
Well, I think so. The PRS makes up, it's the second largest tenure in the UK. So it's 4.6 million households make up the private rental sector. We are ahead of the social housing sector. And I think the PRS has really stepped in to fill in the gaps where social housing should have been and it hasn't been. So I think the private rental sector, landlords in that, they do a really great job of housing so many tenants across the UK. And I think that it's only going to grow. There's only going to be more and more people out there who need homes as our population grows, as there's changing appetites of tenants who want to rent later and live at home longer. So I think the PRS is going to continue to grow. I think it's still a great place to invest your money if you're somebody who, you're a landlord, you're looking to think, what do I do with my savings? You're still going to not only get rent paid to cover the mortgage, but your property's going to go up in capital value as well. So it's still a really great thing to be a landlord. So I hope that whatever changes are brought in, that the PRS will adapt as it always does. It will weather the storm and it will continue to grow and be a great sort of prospering place for landlords to put their money and for tenants to be housed across the UK.
I think that's the perfect way to end the interview. I could go on more, but thank you so much for joining me today, Angharad. It's really great to have you on and hear all your thoughts about obviously the private rented sector, women in property. We covered a lot of topics there, so thank you so much.
Thanks, Gabby. Thanks for asking me to be on.